Hello everyone, welcome back to another video. I am Lunar, and today we're going to be doing another Lunar Yaps video. So today we're going to be talking about the huge problem with map balance inside of Dead by Daylight. Currently, as it stands, there are, I believe, 55 maps in Dead by Daylight. And as it stands, a lot of the maps are considered very poorly balanced, and the reason being because some are incredibly survivor-sided. Some people cite like Garden of Joy, Badham Preschool, and Eyrie of Crows are incredibly survivor-sided and have incredibly easy to loot tiles, and that are that are incredibly safe, and they're also incredibly dense. Some other maps like RPD and Larry's are considered incredibly killer-sided because the inside allows them to get a lot of advantages in terms of like sneaking up on people and being able to get like the advantage in a lot of different loops and stuff like that. Now, currently, what I want to talk about is the main problem with map balance in terms of them being incredibly survivor-sided. Namely, the safe tile and loop density and current maps like the Garden of Joy, Badham Preschool, and the Eyrie of Crows. They have too many safe god palettes and windows that can be chained together, allowing for survivors to just loop killers for several generators without having to do anything. Or maps like the game, where palettes are so dense that looping the killer is just dropping 15 different pallets until 3 gens are completed. Not only that, but a lot of the maps that have gotten reworks or seen some sort of rework have have been terrible. They've received incredibly more amounts of pallets, and pallet density has been increased. A lot of them have a very inconsistent RNG. The point is that, a lot of these different maps allow for these survivors to just abuse tiles. Maps like the Garden of Joy that have super good loops, that have a lot of safe loops and god palettes, they don't allow for survivors to make many mistakes or killers to capitalize on these mistakes. And with that, it also creates a toxic environment for survivors, where they're always their skill is written off as, oh, well, you guys just have high pallet density, that's it. And in the case where we were to look at maps like, let's say, the Ironworks of Misery or any Macmillan Estate map or the Coldwind Farm, you may say like, oh, well, the pallet densities or the tiles aren't that bad, but for some reason they're trying to put new tiles into old maps, and they're also trying to make the pallet density on a lot of these different maps incredibly denser. Which is weird, because we had an entire conversation about how pallet density is bad, and how there are way too many characters way too many maps that just allow for survivors to be incredibly safe. Pallets being incredibly more dense shifts the balance in the survivor's favor. It makes chases excessively long, and it's very frustrating for killers, and especially those without anti-loop abilities. Not to mention that we just had an entire freaking video essay about anti-loop abilities being bad for the game. It's incredibly bad that, because of these bad map balances, people are misinterpreting what the actual problem is. The actual problem being that there's too many pallets and too many windows in one place. While the update was meant to reduce dead zones, it allows survivors to chain loops together incredibly safely. It defeats the entire purpose of having M1 killers, because people like Trapper, Wraith, or Pig struggle against this high pallet density, or they're just stuck eating pallets until eventually they run out of pallets. And of course, we've already seen that inside of Dead by Daylight, it is incredibly rare to quote-unquote run out of pallets. This also renders dead zones non-existent, so people who have good pathing cannot be differentiated from those who don't have good pathing, because either way, you're going to make it back to the loop. And when you do make it back to the loop, there's little to no consequences, because so many pallets are safe. Which brings me to my next point of the fact that there are so many god palettes. Many maps feature multiple safe, high-value god palettes that are too close to each other, and it makes them almost impossible to mind game, and it forces time-consuming amounts of palette kicking. And palette kick simulator is not fun. On to my next point, which is people do not want to play the same killers. In terms of anti-loop and M1 killers and all of this, it all boils down to this one thing of, okay, well, let's just play Nurse or Billy or Blight or someone who just ignores palettes or can shred through them. People do not want to play the same killers over and over and over again. And this basically just forces them to, because you end up just having to continuously play these same killers so you can actually counter the loops. So you don't have to, like, sit in the loop and actually play against them or deal with their good pathing. People don't want to continuously play the same overtuned killers or one spready perk builds with multiple slowdowns. But because they're forced to in these situations, it's incredibly unfair and it's incredibly boring and repetitive. On to my next point about map size, where some maps are overtly big or overtly small. Large cluttered maps significantly hinder killers lacking abilities in terms of mobility or range attacks. They can't pressure far-flung generators or effectively navigate through excessive safe terrain. Maps that are large make it impossible for many killers to patrol all generators effectively, and this makes them have to run like 4 slowdown perks or heavy mobility killers over and over again, and it just takes too long for them to pressure gens, and they're effectively completed by the time you get halfway across the map. It also renders certain killers without mobility completely freaking useless. And on to the next thing with hooking, where hooking becomes ineffective as, like, if you go and hook, there's a hook like 10,000 miles away on the other side of the map that's in the corner of the map, and you're going to waste more time and give more time to the people who are doing the gens, which is why more people end up having to run slowdown perks, because there's no other option. Another problem is that in these big maps, there are many, many, many items that clutter up the space, and it allows survivors to break line of sight way more than they should, and it hinders many killers like Huntress or Deathslinger, and not saying that that's a problem, but for Nurse as well. It also creates unnecessary complications for many killers that allow for infinite-like setups in incredibly palette-dense placements. Finally, I want to talk about the problem with maps being survivor-sided in bully squads. Mainly the fact that bully squads always want to be sent to these specific maps, and it creates an experience that can feel impossible for killers to counter, like Sabo squads or flashlight squads that typically use the elements to provoke, tilt, and prevent the killer from engaging in normal gameplay, such as hooking, rather than trying to win via generators. Because of this and the unfair map balance, it creates a field day for bully squads, where they can abuse map structure or map offerings to just allow them to send them to certain maps, which are heavily survivor-sided, offering numerous safe loops, main buildings with near infinite structures, and high visibility to track the killer. Examples are cited as Garden of Joy, Baden Preschool, RPD, and Haddonfield. These examples are basically just maps that are great for bully squads. They allow for bully squads to get incredible value out of their builds with sabos and flashlights, which allow them to also use head-on and flashbangs to make it nearly impossible to secure a hook. They use map offerings to force the game onto maps with safe spaces or specific layouts that benefit their playstyle. And because of this, it allows them to basically become unhookable. And bully squads are already frustrating enough to hook, but imagine if you're facing a bully squad with wiretap and dark theory while they're running around main building with teamwork power of 2 and blood pact. Like, that's not fun. It's not, because you're just going to end up spending the entire game chasing around that same building. You're going to get tilted, and then boom. It gives so much of an unfair advantage, and because of the fact that maps are so poorly balanced. And because of this, they had to nerf map offerings that to make it so they don't guarantee that the map is going to be the one of the offering, which pissed off a lot of people, but unfortunately it was a necessary evil due to the fact that bully squads were running so rampant with these map offerings. At the end of the day, map balance as a whole creates an entirely new problem besides a bunch of the problems that I've already spoken about. It hinders the gameplay of many killer players and survivor players, and especially killer players as a whole with pallet density and bully squads and all of the stuff like that, where it basically just allows the survivors to abuse these maps and these map offerings and just being able to sabo hooks to the point where it's just unfair for the person who's actually playing the game. It creates a toxic environment with these bully squads, and it is incredibly unfair to those who actually are honestly playing the game. Due to this, a lot of people have started like avoiding playing killer because killer balance is so off with these map designs. Pallet density is continuing to be buffed despite the fact that there are more pallets on the map than there are windows, and there are more god windows and more god pallets than there are actually I don't know, you get the comparison. Like, the point is that, like, there are just way too many safe places to play and way too many safe, maps where it just creates an impossible environment for people to play in. Especially killer players. And as you've seen with this gameplay, where, like, people group up and people get punished for it, like, they end up having this whole problem where, like, this whole problem where, like, people end up having to play survivor, and it's because they simply can't play killer because they find it unbearable. This is the end of my thoughts on map balance and DBD. Please let me know your thoughts and what y'all think in the comments below. This is Lunar signing off. Make sure to like and subscribe. Now this is Lunar signing off. Bye.
Oh my God, he is a kind Samaritan. He is a kind Samaritan. Thank you. Thank you, Michael Myers. Thank you. Dude, I almost got bent over, and there was a P100 Rebecca in my team.